This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni refutes claims of electoral fraud as he wins a sixth term in office. The United States is deploying thousands of National Guard troops in Washington ahead of Joe Biden's inauguration. And search and rescue efforts continue for 22 men trapped underground following a gold mine accident in eastern China. Welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. Also ahead on the program. In business news, Nigeria plans to reduce domestic and foreign borrowing by selling some of its public assets. And in sports, FIFA president is optimistic about football's return as the Africa Nations Championship gets underway. We begin in Uganda, where President Yoweri Museveni has dismissed claims of electoral fraud in the just concluded presidential election. Uganda's Electoral Commission declared President Museveni the winner of the January 14th election after he got just over 57% of the vote. He will now serve a sixth term in office. His main political opponent, Bobi Wine, secured nearly 35% of the vote. Bobi Wine has, however, disputed the result, claiming there was electoral fraud. His representative stated that Wine's team will pursue legal options to challenge the results. But speaking from his rural home, President Museveni denied the allegation.
I think this may turn out to be the most cheating-free election since 1962. Since 1962, we have been having a problem of people want to cheat in the elections. This has been the chronic problem of multiple voting, underage voting, we had the ballot stuffing.
Joe Biden's top aide says the incoming U.S. president will sign about a dozen executive orders on his first day in office, including rejoining the Paris Climate Accord. Thousands of National Guard troops are being deployed in the streets of the U.S. Capitol through Wednesday, when Biden's inauguration takes place. This unprecedented show of force comes in the wake of the assault on Capitol Hill, fueled by those who believe President Donald Trump's false claims of electoral fraud. Trump says he will not be attending Biden's inauguration. Earlier, the government and the FBI released a joint intelligence bulletin which warned that false narratives about electoral fraud would serve as an ongoing catalyst for more anti-government violence by extremist groups. Toby Muse has more on the beefed-up security in Washington.
Washington, D.C. feels militarized with up to 25,000 National Guard ready to be here in the city to protect this city ahead of the inauguration on January the 20th. If you see behind me how they're shutting down various streets across the city, you can see the police and the soldiers there and those trucks, and they're cutting many of the streets across this city. A vast part of downtown Washington, D.C. around the White House is closed to traffic already, and some roads and bridges will be entirely closed in the run-up to the inauguration. While authorities say they are on high alert, it's unclear exactly how many people will turn up as counter-protesters against inauguration. Authorities say they have information of planned protests at all 50 state capitals and Washington, D.C. Authorities continue to make arrests of those who were present for the storming of the Capitol on January the 6th. At least 2 have already asked for President Donald Trump to pardon them, saying they were doing it on his behalf. The Justice Department has launched an investigation into whether intelligence on the protests was sufficiently shared beforehand in what is widely considered a failure to prepare for the violence of January the 6th. Alex Azar, the Health and Human Services Secretary, has submitted his resignation. It's normally just a formality, but he used his letter to criticize Trump's actions and rhetoric, saying they could tarnish the legacy of his administration. Trump's transportation secretary and education secretary exited his administration early because of the violence. President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris introduced key members of their science team. Dr. Eric Lander will be their nominee to be director of the Office of Science and Technology Policy. For the first time, that post will be cabinet level.
This is a team that asks us to imagine every home in America being powered by renewable energy within the next 10 years, or 3D image printers restoring tissue after traumatic injuries, and hospitals printing organs for organ transplants.
Biden has repeatedly criticized Trump's commitment to science, saying that the president has downplayed the threat of both climate change and the coronavirus. Toby Muse reporting for CGTN, Washington.
A heavily armed man has been arrested at a security checkpoint near the U.S. Capitol. The Virginia man named Wesley Allen Beeler tried to use a fake credential to access the restricted area where President-elect Joe Biden will be inaugurated on January the 20th. Officers noticed decals on the back of Beeler's pickup truck. One said "Assault Life" with an image of a rifle. A search uncovered a loaded handgun, more than 500 rounds of ammunition, a shotgun, and a magazine for the gun. Beeler has been arrested on charges including possession of an unregistered firearm and unlawful possession of ammunition. Well, let's now move to the latest on the coronavirus pandemic. The Chinese mainland reported 109 new coronavirus infections on Saturday. 96 of them are local cases, with over 70 in Hebei province. Among the rest, 10 are in Jilin, 12 in Heilongjiang, and 2 in Beijing. 13 imported cases have also been reported in 7 different provinces. Central China's Hubei province, the epicenter of China's pandemic about a year ago, has sent medical supplies worth over $1.5 million to Hebei to help curb the outbreak. Well, Heilongjiang province has become a new hotspot in China. A second round of mass testing is expected to conclude today in Huangqi County in the city of Suihua, which reported most of the new infections in the region. Heilongjiang has actually seen a downward trend in increased cases over the past days, but authorities are still on high alert, urging residents to avoid unnecessary gatherings. Sun Tiangyuan reports.
There has been a decline in new confirmed coronavirus cases actually in Heilongjiang over the past days. The figure dropped from dozens to 12 yesterday, but the city of Suihua, a 2-hour drive away from the provincial capital Harbin, still remains the worst hit area in Heilongjiang's latest outbreak. Now, it accounts for almost all the cases in the province. Huangqi County, under Suihua City's jurisdiction, reported 11 new confirmed cases yesterday. 6 were previously diagnosed from asymptomatic patients and later confirmed. So meanwhile, 12 asymptomatic patients were reported in the county, with 4 in Suihua district. That's over 3/4 of the total cases reported in Heilongjiang. Now, the infections were detected in Suihua's mass testing drive recently. They were either close contacts of Huangqi patients or infected by their close contacts. So all have been transferred to designated locations for treatment or medical observation under quarantine. So meanwhile, in the neighboring Jilin province, 10 new confirmed cases have been reported, an alarming increase of 63 asymptomatic cases. Nearly all are related to a super spreader from Heilongjiang, who was reportedly on the same train as 2 infected passengers from Huangqi. The man has passed on the virus to at least 98 people in 3 cities in Jilin. The majority of them are over 60 years old and had attended the man's health classes. Jilin's cumulative asymptomatic cases reached 100 as of Saturday.
The UK has reported its lowest number of daily new cases so far this year, but even that means over 41,000 more infections on Saturday. And the 1,300 deaths recorded is one of the highest numbers on record. Doctors say hospitals in many places are becoming increasingly overwhelmed. Patients are also reported to be younger and sicker than in the first wave. This comes as the country is conducting a mass vaccination and questions remain over the kind of protection that vaccines can offer. Nicole Johnson takes a look from London.
The arrival of COVID-19 vaccines has been called a game changer. But there's one big unknown, and that's transmission.
You may get protection from severe illness. That's brilliant. It saves your life. On the other hand, it may give you mild illness. And if it gives you mild illness, you may also be infectious during the course of that mild illness. And therefore, if there is somebody else who is unvaccinated or under-immunized, they could be the recipient of your mild illness and go on to have either a mild illness themselves or, unfortunately, a severe illness.
Good afternoon and welcome back.
And that's what countries like the UK are concerned about.
What we don't yet know, but we're following very closely, and there's detail set out in the plan today, is how much you might transmit COVID, even if you don't suffer from the disease after you've had the vaccine.
COVID-19 vaccines produce a class of antibodies that protect your immune system by patrolling your muscles and blood. But to prevent transmission, you may need a different type of antibody, one that patrols the nose, throat and lungs.
On the whole, the vaccine will enable the body's immune system to get going, and it will mean that the virus will not replicate much in the nose. And so it will reduce the chance of transmission, but we don't know whether that chances of transmission will fall to zero.
So even when large numbers of people are vaccinated, it's unlikely that countries like Australia and New Zealand with closed borders will be in any rush to open them. And that's because of the risk of reintroducing new infections into the country.
Vaccines have given people hope that there's a way out of this crisis. But until we know about transmission, there are no shortcuts back to a normal life. Nicole Johnston, CGTN, London.
In South Africa, a new locally produced oxygen device could become a game changer in the battle to save COVID-19 patients. The oxygen-efficient respiratory device, or Oxira, as it's most commonly known, uses far less oxygen. This is ideal for poorly resourced hospitals. CGTN's Travers Andrews has more.
The Oxira device is expected to be a new weapon in the battle to save COVID-19 patients presenting with severe illness. It bridges an important gap between standard oxygen therapy and ICU-based non-invasive and mechanical ventilation. The device was designed by a team of volunteers and uses a fraction of the oxygen that other medical devices use.
How it works is it's a marrying of a couple of different things that we already use in the hospital environment. So we already use oxygen masks with a bag on them to try and provide a high level of oxygen to the patient. So we use the oxygen bag from that system. We marry that with an anesthetic mask, which has got an inflatable skirt on it that allows you to create a snug fit onto the patient's face.
By combining that with the PEEP valve, which mechanically adjusts the pressure that the patient can breathe out against, it keeps the lungs from collapsing. With 73 tons of oxygen being used every day to treat COVID-19 patients in the Western Cape, supplies are low.
Not only do we not have the oxygen available, but it's expensive. It's quite an expensive commodity. And really many of in fact, the majority of our hospitals that don't have access to the kind of volumes of oxygen that you would need to run high-flow nasal, high-flow devices. And so their therapy is capped at just oxygen masks at the moment. And so our device helps them to extend that for the very sick patient.
The oxygen device will also be locally produced and forms part of broader efforts to tap into South African innovation.
We're focusing on the South African market initially because that was the original purpose of the design, is to try and address the COVID-19 pandemic in South Africa. But as it turns out, and because of our production capacity, we have no problem actually turning to export as well. With a single shift, we can produce 15,000 units a week.
It's not just medical facilities in urban centers that are set to benefit from the device, as those in rural settings are also set to benefit as well due to its efficiency. With oxygen rationing now taking place at public hospitals, its release also comes at a critical time. I'm Andrew, CGTN, Cape Town.
You're watching Africa Live, still ahead on the program. Search and rescue efforts continue for 22 men trapped underground following a gold mine accident in eastern China.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
Libyan political talks arranged by the United Nations have made progress towards an agreement on the formation of a new transitional government. The transitional team will oversee the run-up to elections in December. The meeting took place in Geneva. Leaders who attended the discussions agreed on a mechanism for choosing the new government, whose formation has been the subject of wrangling among rival factions in the country. The UN envoy to Libya, Stephanie Williams, says the agreement represented the best possible compromise on the issue and could lead to the selection of a transitional government in several weeks. Williams, however, warns that there would still be parties seeking to obstruct the peacemaking efforts in Libya. Well, let's talk about this further now with CGTN's Adel Mahuri. He's joining me from Cairo. Adel, what do you know about the latest agreement?
So basically, Stephanie Fried announced that a consultative committee that has been formed from the Committee of 75, those 75 members that represent all Libyan and have been part of the Libyan Political Forum, which has started or began in Tunisia and has been holding regular meetings, mainly online because of the COVID-19 restrictions, to complete the negotiations. Now that consultative committee has reached a formation through which members of top positions, namely the government and the Presidential Council, can be selected. And it basically dictates that each of Libya's three neighbors, south, east, and west, each of these regions, the members of them in the forum will elect or select those who will be chosen or represent them in the Presidential Council and the government. They should be able to vote on the representative. Anyone who gets 70% will be part of that transitional government. And if they fail, another round of vote will take place, trying to reach 50% plus one. So the purpose here is to reach consensus, or at least a sweeping majority under specific names. And if that did not find a way through, a regular 50% plus one vote selection process will move forward so as not to stall the selection process for the transition government any further.
Adel, so this is quite an important development. What is the next step? What happens next?
It is, of course, a great step, actually, because this has been the main reason or the main purpose through which Stephanie Williams and the Libyans have been trying to have any breakthrough, is to reach on to get an agreement over a criteria or a way to select the representatives. Now, tomorrow, on Monday, the proposal that I just mentioned and Stephanie Williams has announced from Geneva will be put for a vote by the 75 members of the Libyan Political Forum. If they pass it, it means that within a few weeks, the names for the transitional government will be finally settled, and Libyans will have finally agreed on those who will lead the next transitional period that will end by the coming December. This is the date, on the 24th of December, where Libyans have agreed to hold general elections, and that transitional government will have its mission completed by the elections. It will hand over the authority, the management of the country toward this elected executive authority, and technically Libya's entire political crisis should be finally put to an end.
Adel Makhloui joining us there from Cairo with an update on Libya. Thank you. Now, search and rescue efforts continue for 22 men still trapped underground following an explosion at a gold mine in eastern China last Sunday. Rescuers have drilled a hole to deliver food and water to the group. 14 teams with over 400 members in total and hundreds of pieces of equipment are working around the clock at the site in Shandong province. Huang Yue reports from Xichia.
It's been already a week since an explosion ripped through a gold mine here in Qixia, Shandong province, and so far rescuers are still unable to make contact with the 22 miners trapped underground because the communication signal was damaged in the explosion. Now there are a total of 6 drillers working together to drill holes at the rescue operation site. And one of the drillers has already reached a depth of over 570 meters, but this is still some distance away from the trapped workers because they were working at a depth of nearly 700 meters down when the explosion occurred at 2 p.m. on January the 10th. An expert on the site said the rescue operation is now facing great mechanical difficulties. And the most difficult thing has been to clear up the debris stuck in the shaft following the explosion. The shaft is so narrow that no more than 3 people at a time can go down to work on clearing debris, and wires, ropes, cables, steel bars, all of these are tangled up together downside. Rescuers are using hydraulic cutters to sever cables and wires and oxy-fuel welding to cut metal objects. So far, the debris above the depth of 350 meters has been cleared up. In the meantime, an expert said the geological conditions are quite complicated here. There are many zones that have been crushed underground, and some drillers actually hit a crushed zone, and the drill bits were stuck in rock cracks as they go deeper. There are also zones holding water. When the holes connect with each other, it's very possible the groundwater could flush up into the shaft, which would also endanger the trapped miners. Shandong provincial government announced that the party secretary and vice mayor of Qixia have been removed from the post due to their major roles in the late reporting of the accident. The 2 officials will also be held accountable according to the results of the ongoing investigation. So far, we still don't know what consequences the company of the gold mine may face. But previously, local authorities said the Shandong provincial government has established a specific team to investigate the explosion and the company involved. And the results of the investigation will be announced to the public in a timely way.
The party of German Chancellor Angela Merkel has selected a new leader. Armin Laschet will be the new head of the Christian Democratic Union after a tight race. For the first time ever, party members voted virtually for the 59-year-old German state premier, who is poised to take on the chancellorship if the party holds on to power in the September elections. Ryan Thompson reports from Frankfurt.
Auf Armin Laschet. Entfallen.
It came down to the wire, with just 60 votes separating two men contending for Germany's most powerful political post. But in the end, State Premier Armin Laschet won a majority of support and will now lead the Christian Democratic Union in the first chapter of the post-Merkel era.
I will give my all to walk together through this year to win the regional election coming up in a few short weeks, and then make sure that we will win the next general elections and keep the position of Chancellor as a member of our party.
The close Merkel loyalist reportedly had the Chancellor's backing, as well as publicly so from a majority of her cabinet members. Many say they preferred the more centrist positions on the economy, healthcare, and immigration. The 59-year-old has had a long career in German politics, but has struggled with name recognition and popularity at home.
Armin Laschet has a lot of executive experience. He's minister-president of Germany's most populous state, but his popularity has been wobbly due to his handling of the coronavirus pandemic.
All eyes are now on September, when Germans will go to the polls and potentially change the balance of power in the Bundestag. It will be the first time in more than 2 decades that the Chancellor Angela Merkel is absent from the process.
Though historically the CSU joins the CDU in a common pick for Chancellor, some believe that Armin Laschet is not a shoo-in just because he's the new party leader. Bavarian State Premier and CSU heavyweight Markus Söder looks to have a lot of potential and could upset the alliance down the line.
Markus Söder has the profile, the reputation, and the star power to do it. But in the meantime, he sent Laschet his best wishes, promising to continue the union's success story. Ryan Thompson, CGTN, Frankfurt.
And back here in Africa, American troops are pulling out of Somalia as the deadline for their complete withdrawal approaches. Their departure comes at a critical time for the Horn of Africa nation as it plans to go to the polls amid increased threats from insurgent groups. CGTN's Abdulaziz Bilo has more from Mogadishu.
Prime Minister Mohamed Hussein Roble is rallying his country's forces ahead of the withdrawal of American troops from Somalia. For years, the U.S. government has been mentoring this elite unit of the armed force known as DANAP at this military base south of the capital, Mogadishu.
On our part as the government, we are ready to stand by your side, ready to provide our unconditional support. Both the President and the administration are ready to work with all of you. We look forward to joining you in the battlefront.
At least 700 armed personnel are stationed in the East African nation, assisting the Somali Army and African Union forces in battling militant groups Al-Shabaab and ISIL. Almost all U.S. personnel stationed in Somalia are due to leave the country by 15th January. This is after the American President Donald Trump ordered their withdrawal. Abdsalam Guled is a security and counterterrorism expert. He says the departure of American troops will impact years of security cooperation between Mogadishu and Washington.
Now is the election time. It's a terrible time where all Somalis' energy and effort is and mind and money focused and concentrate on elections. In 2 months' time, hopefully, we will have a new government, either this government coming back or another government installed. And I hope the Americans will do the same. Then Joe Biden will probably move into the office in January and reverse the policy towards Somalia, reverse the American withdrawal from Somalia, and probably we will see more American boots on the ground in Somalia.
The country is preparing to conduct elections for new lawmakers, senators and president. The polls will be conducted in at least 2 districts in each of the country's 5 regional states. Militant group Al-Shabaab has threatened to disrupt the electoral process. In the past, it has targeted electoral delegates, clan elders, and some of the parliamentary candidates. Meanwhile, the federal government has deployed paramilitary troops to some of the hotspot areas, including Hiran and the Gedo region.
The executive order from the president, no one can challenge it. But of course, no one will agree with them, what they have started, what people have appreciated, what the taxpayers spend the money on it, and has been just withdrawn for no reason, and no any political reason, no security reason. Threat of Al-Shabaab is on the rise in the region, in Somalia. And I think the Somali government is not anywhere close to, to take over their own security. And if Americans withdraw now, you see what happens now in Galkayo, you see what happened in Mogadishu last few months.
The US Africa Command says it's repositioning its troops to nearby bases in Kenya and Djibouti and will continue the fight against Al-Qaeda and ISIL. In the first half of January, a wave of new airstrikes in Somalia have killed more than a dozen militants and destroyed some of their strategic compounds. Abdul Aziz Bilo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Meanwhile, in Tunisia, the country's Prime Minister Hichem Mechichi has announced a cabinet reshuffle. 12 ministries will be affected in the reshuffle. Tunisia's parliament will now have to approve the new lineup.
I have decided to carry out a cabinet reshuffle while preserving the philosophy of independent government, supported by a political and parliamentary majority. The aim of this reshuffle is to achieve greater efficiency in the work of the government's policy and plans.
A quick recap now of the headlines this hour. Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni has dismissed claims of electoral fraud in the just concluded presidential poll. Uganda's Electoral Commission declared Museveni the winner of the January 14th election after he got just over 57% of the vote. He will now serve a sixth term in office. His main opponent, Bobi Wine, secured nearly 35% of the vote. Wine has, however, disputed the results, claiming there was electoral fraud. His representative stated that Wine's team will pursue legal options to challenge the results. But speaking from his rural home, President Museveni said the polls were the most transparent since 1962. Thousands of National Guard troops are being deployed in the streets of the United States Capitol through Wednesday when Joe Biden's inauguration takes place. This unprecedented show of force comes in the wake of the assault on Capitol Hill, fueled by those who believe President Donald Trump's false claims of electoral fraud. Trump says he will not be attending Biden's inauguration. Earlier, the government and the FBI released a joint intelligence bulletin which warned that false narratives about electoral fraud would serve as an ongoing catalyst for more anti-government violence by extremist groups. And search and rescue efforts continue for 22 men still trapped underground following an explosion at a gold mine in eastern China last Sunday. Rescuers have drilled a hole to deliver food and water to the group. 14 teams with over 400 members in total and hundreds of pieces of equipment are working around the clock at the site in Shandong province. The provincial government announced that the party secretary and vice mayor of Shichia city have been removed from the posts due to their major roles in the late reporting of the accident. Well, let's now take a look at your business headlines. Here's what's coming up. Nigeria plans to reduce domestic and foreign borrowing by selling some of its public assets.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The Nigerian government says it will sell some of its public assets to fund its 2021 budget. It is part of plans to reduce its domestic and foreign borrowing this year. Phili Haza reports from Abuja.
Nigeria's Finance Minister Zainab Ahmed confirmed the decision to sell some government-owned assets in a document she presented to lawmakers. She says this is a move to boost Nigeria's economy and provide the government with more funds to finance the 2021 budget. Nigeria's budget, which was signed into law by President Muhammadu Buhari in December last year, is $35 billion, but there is a deficit of $13.5 billion. Many have condemned the federal government's consistent resolve to borrow to fund the budget, which has left the country owing about $90 billion. As a way of reducing the debt burden, the government says it will sell some non-oil assets to serve as an additional source of finance. The minister did not state the assets that are being put up for sale, neither did she state the expected revenue from the sales, but there's been speculation that the government plans to sell some power plants and real estate. Idle assets in Nigeria's real estate and agriculture alone have been estimated to be worth $900 billion, according to accounting firm PricewaterhouseCoopers. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
The impact of the coronavirus pandemic, rising inflation and border closures have driven significant changes in the behavior for retailers, distributors and manufacturers in Nigeria. Notable changes include smaller packaging for consumer goods, according to a Trade Depot, a business-to-business e-commerce platform for consumer goods in Africa. They expect the trend, which started last year, to continue, with consumers mainly spending on food and essential goods due to dwindling disposable incomes. Spending more time at home is also expected to continue influencing consumer behavior. A new Chinese-built oil and gas platform is poised to leave its construction site in the eastern province of Shandong province and head to the country's biggest gas field in the South China Sea. It is the first platform of its kind in the world. Our reporter Kao Bing has more from Yanchai.
After 21 months of construction, China's Deepwater #1 semi-submersible production and storage platform is finally on its way to where it'll serve the country's first deepwater gas field in the South China Sea. The gas field, which is called Lingshui 17-2, is 150 kilometers away from the city Sanya in Hainan province and lies at the depth of 150,000 meters. Both these facts pose new challenges and uncertainties. General Director of the project, You Xuegang, said special designs have been used to help the platform better adapt to the environment.
These 4 pillars, as you can see, are used for oil storage. This is the first of its kind in the world. It can store a maximum of 20,000 cubic meters of oil for 10 days, allowing extra time for delivery vessel to carry the oil back on land 1,500 kilometers away.
The platform is also designed to resist oxidation and the toughest typhoon, and should be able to work in the field for at least 30 years without needing to return to dry dock.
This platform weighs in at an impressive 50,000 tons, so building it was obviously not an easy task, especially given the challenges such as severe cold snap, limited time, and of course, COVID-19 pandemic. But none of those were allowed to get in the way of completing the project and meeting all the important quality standards.
The China Classification Society carried out a strict quality checking process for the project. Let's take this weld, for example. It's a full 600 kilometer in length, and we checked all of it centimeter by centimeter, and it's all very well done. Only in this way can we achieve smooth operation of the project.
It will take about a month-long voyage for the platform to arrive in Hainan. It's expected to begin operation in June to provide 3 billion cubic meters of gas for households in South Hainan province and the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau Greater Bay Area.
This project is a test for our design level, our shipbuilding level, as well as deep water project management.
Yu says despite difficulties and challenges ahead, there is no doubt that China has taken a solid first step towards deep water oil exploration. Cao Bing, CGTN, Yantai, Shandong Province.
South Africa's embattled wine industry could lose an estimated $100 million worth of stock as it runs out of space to store excess wine. The new harvest is starting amid a third alcohol sales ban, threatening the financial viability of one of the biggest employers in the Western Cape. Angelo Coppola picks up the story.
SA Breweries is challenging the constitutionality of the third ban. The company says the first 2 bans saw 165,000 people lose their jobs, with another 100,000 people moving into poverty as a result of the alcohol bans.
We're looking at tens of millions of litres, but that's still a lot of wine. That is an issue because obviously cellars are full and people need to harvest and we need to bring in the new harvest. So we're looking at probably about 65% of the previous harvest not being sold. yet, which is a huge issue for the industry because sellers have to be cleared so that we can actually go into production and we've got space. The impact's been really significant. I mean, if they say that the ban will only be lifted on the 15th of February, we will have not been able to trade in South Africa for 5.5 months of our financial year. And 50% of our business is local business.
The wine industry employs some 500,000 people with an annual turnover of around $500 million. The 3 alcohol bans have been devastating.
Wine tourism is a very important part of our business. Normally, Creation has 64,000 visitors a year visiting us. Well, obviously, we are at half that amount this year so far. And the impact is significant. We have 50 people that work in wine tourism in our tasting room. And, you know, we had to retrench 20 people. We had no choice to do that. A few months ago, we managed to bring most of them back on board when we were allowed to open up again. And we're in a precarious position yet again.
The wine industry was caught completely off guard when South African President Cyril Ramaphosa announced another lockdown late in December.
We had a full book of reservations until, you know, the 15th of January. And so we had to obviously cancel all of those reservations, and we've now had to cancel reservations going forward until the ban is lifted.
The wine industry in South Africa is in a state of flux at the moment, and decisions have to be made and made quickly, otherwise it's going to suffer irreparable damage. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
The chaos that ensued at the Beitbridge border post between South Africa and Zimbabwe over the festive season should serve as an important lesson for the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. This is the message from road and freight bodies across the continent. A truck driver died while waiting to get through the border post. The incident has sparked concerns of a full-blown humanitarian crisis at Beitbridge. CGTN Sumitra Naidu reports.
It was a combination of inadequate capacity and issues around COVID that caused the chaos between South Africa and Zimbabwe. The Beitbridge border post is one of the busiest from South Africa.
We wouldn't have had to have this disaster if people did not leave the holding areas. Now, of course, we have learned a lesson that once we establish a process with the trade industry, we must believe then they will follow it forever. They've shown us that they need to be policed continuously, every minute.
Last year, Zimbabwe exported goods to South Africa worth over $1.57 billion. Its imports totaled $2.2 billion. And the plan, not only for these two countries, but the whole of the continent, is to create more ease of trade, increase imports and exports, and reduce costs. But on the eve of the landmark Africa Free Trade Area coming into place, there was clear evidence that not everyone is ready.
We hope to come up with a plan that we'll be able to work together collectively and make things work in future, because the smooth flow of traffic and people through border posts is an absolute must for ACFA to work.
It's less chaotic at the border post this week, but there are still queues. But that's also because South Africa has now closed the border posts until the 15th of Feb. Only those doing trade will be able to gain access.
So far, this time it's easier. It's easier now crossing here to Zimbabwe side, yeah. Unlike last year, December time. This time it's okay.
This border, it's okay, but the last days it's tough to cross here to go to other side. It's a lot of trucks here, a lot of congestion. But now it's now clear. No problem now.
Freight bodies believe there's so much more work to be done before the African Free Trade Agreement can be implemented effectively.
There's a lot to be done in Southern Africa in terms of border post efficiency. We are so far behind East Africa in terms of the development of one-stop border posts and single customs territories and regional bonds, which improves the smooth flow of cargo through the borders from origin to destination. That hasn't happened in South Africa, largely due to lack of political will in the region.
The road and freight sector want cargo to have its own access through borders. South Africa is in the meantime looking into infrastructure developments to improve efficiency and capacity. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, South Africa.
Tunisians are eager to switch to 5G technology and expect it to be rolled out in the next 2 years. A survey conducted by the government shows users in various fields such as agriculture, industry, medical and service say 5G will help optimize costs and increase production in the North African state. From Tunis, here is CGTN's Adnan Chauchi with the details.
Karim Mahrez is a senior consultant and a successful ICT entrepreneur in Tunisia and Africa. He says that 5G's industrial applications will bring revolutionary change and will form the backbone of future economic advancement and public services.
5G is a real opportunity because it will create some 22 million new jobs by 2030. It will create $13 trillion of growth and new projects. We must understand that 5G is not like the evolution of the mobile phone from 3G to 5G. 5G is some 1 million IoT per square kilometer. 5G is the 4.0 industry, drones, digital art, connected schools with robots. 5G is also telesurgery.
Tunisia's telecoms minister had earlier said licenses suitable for the next generation of mobile broadband services could be awarded this year. The Netcom Tunisia chief executive says 5G will offer an opportunity for developing countries to boost their economies and create new jobs in new sectors. He asserts that China's Huawei is the world leader in this technology.
Huawei does not only offer this possibility of 5G infrastructure with the Internet of Things and industry-related services, it's more than that. Huawei also provides the layers above like artificial intelligence as well as data and privacy protection. I am sure that many decision makers in Africa and developing countries are smart enough to deploy and use Chinese networks and artificial intelligence than any other competitors.
Huawei Northern Africa's vice president in charge of public relations for the Mediterranean region, Adnan Ben Halima, explains that the Chinese company is willing to install 5G technology that will help Tunisia and the world.
5G technology now is a new trend of technologies. I think it will play a very important role for the future to develop new services and provide new connectivity. We are really eager to deploy this technology in Tunisia and also in other countries in this region. Huawei is very advanced thanks to the research and development efforts that have been done recently, and thanks to the product quality and the solution that we are providing to our customers.
In December 2020, Tunisia Telecom carried out the first test call, which showed a speed of connections to the 5G mobile network exceeding 2.2 gigabytes per second. This 5G mobile test call was made with a smartphone and a modem, using the telecom company's live network. According to the ICT Ministry, Tunisia's telecoms regulators launched a feasibility study of 5G. The licenses suitable for the next generation of mobile broadband services could be awarded in 2021. Experts assert that 5G networks will change several industries. Adnan Chauchi, CGTN, Tunis.
And your sports news coming up next. Here's what's ahead. FIFA president optimistic about football's return as the African Nations Championship gets underway.
How would you create your legend?